So we're just going to open the meeting. So I'd like to welcome you to the 521st meeting of the Canterbury Regional Council. I'd like to welcome Suki Thompson, Cynthia Roberts and Richard Sugate, and also they're all from the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust, and I'd like to welcome Grant Davey, who's here as well, and from the Ashley Bird Care Group, River Care Group. They are going to be presenting in the public forum. I'd also like to welcome Gina Wybill, Kevin Brown and Les Wanhala, who will be presenting later on, and I'm not sure if any of you have arrived yet, but I don't think so. We can welcome you again later. Who are going to be presenting the Zone Committee annual reports. Today we will be adopting the consultation document and our long-term plan, and that will be considered after our lunch break. This meeting is not being live streamed, but we are recording it, and we will make that recording available on the website. And now I'd like to invite our Tumu Taiao, Yayan Cramwell, to give a mihi whakato, and followed by Councillor Craig Pauling to open the meeting with a karakia.
Tēnei te ruru, te kaukau mai nei ki hai mā, hiti hiti ki hai mā, raka raka tūpoka nui o te ruru, te reka. He po, he ao kāwe tēti hei wā, mauri ora. Ko te mea tuatai ki turu karawa nōna, te timataka nōna, te whakamutuka. Kaori ino e ano hoki nāna, tiaki, manaki, ia tātu katoa i ka wā katoa. Huri au ki a rātou koe au ki te pō, moi mai rā o ki o ki mai. Ki a rātou ko takahia tāra whānui o tāne. Ki au te moi mai rā, tiraha, whakatā. Apatino tātou hono, rātou ki a rātou. Apatino tātou hono, tātou ki a tātou. Nō reira nei rā te mihi ki au koutou katoa, ko rau i ka mai tēnei rā mo tēnei hui, o te kauni Taiao ki Waitaha. E mihi hoki, ki te ropu reipua, te Pāti Māori, o te he whakaai, o ngā tūru Māori ki runga i ngā kaunihera hurinoa Aotearoa. Ko whakaai ko rātou, o tēnei mahi, te rapua kei te whakaai i ngā kaunihera hurinoa te motu, ka tae rātou ki te pōti, o te tūru Māori ki runga i ngā tepu kaunihera. Nō reira he whakaaro raki tērā, he pai ake mō Aotearoa, mō aki tōnu atu. Nō reira nei rā te mihi te ropu reipua, te Pāti Māori, ki a rātou i te ropu kākariki hoki, i whakaai i tērā mahi i ngā pō. Huri no te tepu, tēnā koutou katoa. I stand here just welcome everyone to the council meeting, Rod Donald Trust, nei te mihi ki a koutou katoa. And in an auspicious occasion last night with the Parliament voting on allowing the Māori bill to go through, so the poll won't go ahead, and therefore if a council decides to put Māori wards, they have the opportunity to do that. So auspicious occasion for New Zealand and for Aotearoa, for councils and councillors to make that decision going forward. On that note, looking forward to this meeting today. It's going to be an auspicious occasion. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tata katoa. Huri au ki a Councillor Pauling mo te karakia.
Tēnā koe, Ian, mo tō mihi ki te runga rawa, ki ngā mate, ki ngā manuhiri ki o kua taumai nei, tēnā koe. Ki a koe, Jenny, mo tō mihi hoki, ki ngā manuhiri, ki ngā kaimahi, ki ngā kai kaunihira, tēnā koe. Ai, he karakia timatanga o tātou nei hui, whakatake te hau ki te uru, whakatake te hau ki te tonga, ki a mā kina ki te, ki a mā taratara ki tai, he hea ki ana te atakora, he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, tihei, hauri ora. Ora.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Jan. Now, just like to draw attention to everybody that there's two sources of media, and there's a media person from the Timaru paper, Matthew Littlewood's online, and there's a media person from the press and the staff in the room. I'd just like to also say to everybody who else is online, There's no councillors online, but please don't be using the notes or any other online facility. It's just there to enable your access to listen at the moment, and that goes for all of us in the room as well. So we'll just be having one conversation in this meeting. Thank you. Apologies. I don't think there are any apologies. I haven't been advised of any additional conflicts of interest. And now the session, we will have the public forum, in which we can have deputations and petitions as well. But I'll invite the group from the Rod Donald Trust to speak, and a very special welcome to you, Cynthia, coming back. Cynthia's a past councillor, so welcome. Thank you.
Ena mana, ena rea, ena rangatira mā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's a delight to be on the other side of the table and see the smiling faces of some of my ex-colleagues and councillors. So thank you for the opportunity to talk today. There are three of us presenting from the Rod Donald Trust. I'll just set off the scene in terms of what the Rod Donald Trust is all about and our vision, and a little bit of the history. Richard is going to take you through the main focus of today, which is the vision of Te Ahu Pātaki. And Suki, our Trust Board Manager, is going to conclude with talk about the partnerships that we've already got involved in this project, and of course hoping that Environment Canterbury is going to be one of those partners. So just a little bit of background for those of you who aren't familiar with the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust. It was established in 2010. It's a charitable council-controlled organisation. It's named for Rod Donald, who was an MP at the time, but there is actually no political affiliations. He was a prominent member of the Banks Peninsula community, and so that is why his name was chosen. The funds that we have to operate our organisation were derived from the Banks Peninsula District Council when it amalgamated with the City Council, and they had the vision to see that these funds shouldn't just go into the consolidated funds, that they should be put aside solely for the work on the Banks Peninsula. So our vision is around developing environmental guardians, looking at how we can improve public walking and access for bikes as well. Enhancing biodiversity is a big part of our mahi, and promoting knowledge and working partnerships with others who share the vision of the Banks Peninsula. I'm really proud to be have been a member of the Banks Peninsula, the Rod Donald Trust, for the 6 years that I've been on that, because I feel that in that short time we have achieved so much. We've built 2 tramping huts. We've created a network of walks. We've included reserves. We've bought opportunities where we can see creating corridors. We've got 452 hectares of biodiversity, and we were one of the catalysts for the Banks pest-free Banks Peninsula. One of our lasting legacies, I think, is also around these brochures that we've produced, mapping all the tracks on the Banks Peninsula that are available at any of the information centres. We've got ones on Akaroa, we've got ones on Governor's Bay, and we've also facilitated 2 major reference books. You'll know Hugh Wilson's book on the plants of the Banks Peninsula, and the one around the jetty at Governor's Bay. And our lovely annual Banks Peninsula Walking Festival just attracts hundreds of people each year, and is always introducing new places to Christchurch folk on the Banks Peninsula. So handing over to you, Richard.
Thank you, tēnā koutou katoa. We've got a very brief video which outlines the significance of Te Ahu Pātaki in support of the reason why it should be protected.
Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust is seeking your support to help create a new conservation park protecting the highest peaks in the Christchurch area, Mount Herbert and Mount Bradley. The new Te Ahu Pātaki Park will include 500 hectares of highly visible land on the southern flanks of Whakaraupo, Littleton Harbour. The land will be managed so that native biodiversity can flourish. Enduring walking access on a network of tracks crossing the property will be secured, and wonderful new recreational opportunities for biking and climbing opened up. In conjunction with neighbouring Orton Bradley Park below, the new park will enable Ki Uta Ki Tai, summit to sea protection for the largest catchment feeding the harbour. Please help us bring this vision to reality by donating generously. Click Donate Now on the Rod Donald Trust website.
Okay, I'd just like to highlight a number of those key points that were traversed in the video. First, that it's a significant piece of land above Whakaraupo. It is going to protect the two highest peaks on Banks Peninsula, which, of course, Banks Peninsula is an outstanding natural feature and landscape within the your regional policy statement. It's also an outstanding landscape in the Christchurch District Plan. It will secure public access on the Tiara Patika tramping route, which goes from Gebbies Pass to Hilltop. And it will also create some continuous biodiversity protection from the bottom of Orton Bradley Park all the way through to Hilltop through a series of reserves and covenants. So it will help create a very significant biodiversity feature for the peninsula. We have a sale and purchase agreement in place, and we will settle that on the 1st of July 2021. And until that date, we are fundraising to meet our target. It will obviously enhance the catchment by withdrawing stock. There will be managed for natural regeneration, and though it may have a considerable gorse cover, those people who are familiar with Hinawai project will understand that that gorse will naturally regenerate through into native forest over a period of 10, 20 years. It is also going to provide summit to sea protection for the Te Whārau catchment. It's the largest catchment flowing into Whakaraupo. It flows through Orton Bradley Park, and the Orton Bradley Park have already fenced out the sides of it and has established a number of QE2 covenants, and we will also put Te Ahu Pātiki into a covenant of protection. The upper part of the Western Waiaki catchment will also be improved as well. All of this will deliver on the Whakaora Healthy Harbour Management Plan that will improve mahinga kai for Whakaraupo. It will reduce erosion and improve water quality. And you can see that quote, which comes from the Whakaora plan. But this will also support the work of the Banks Peninsula Zone Committee.
So I'll take over now. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm going to talk a little bit about the partnerships that we've formed since we put that sale and purchase agreement in place. So we've been working very closely with Te Hapu o Ngāti Whaki, and I would really like to thank Yvette Couch-Lewis for her part in helping us build this relationship. We have established that Te Ahu Pātiki is the appropriate name for this land. And we're currently working on a three-way MOU between ourselves, Ngāti Whaki, and Orton Bradley Park. And what that is doing, is establishing our shared aims and values. And we're all very close in what we're looking for. Biodiversity protection is absolutely up there, catchment protection, respect for the summits while allowing public access, cultural access for Ngāti Whaki, for mana whenua, and fire prevention. The project is supported by Whakaora. We have a letter of support from them. We've been to the Zone Committee. We have a letter of support from them, the Community Board also, and Orton Bradley Park are right behind the project with financial support and offering to manage and own the property long term. And the public have really demonstrated their support for our fundraising campaign. So we kicked off the campaign with a $1.5 million goal. We had 900,000 in hand with the funds the Trust is putting in Orton Bradley Park. And we've now raised another 350 from the public. So that is for the purchase and the setup of the park. And so, as Cynthia said at the beginning, we're very much hoping that ECAN will become a partner in this project because we are achieving so many of ECAN's goals. We have 4 different levels of sponsorship in here, and our premier level of sponsorship is our total donors. That is for a donation of 50,000 or more, and we are hoping that ECAN will be a total sponsor in recognition of the benefits this brings to the people of Canterbury and our environment. So we're looking for total sponsorship for that land purchase. We also would like to suggest some ongoing level of support for the Te Whārau catchment protection, and we'd like to suggest that maybe ECAM would provide a grant of $10,000 per year towards pest and weed control, so that that catchment can be fully retired and or the upper part fully retired and brought into a native biodiversity reserve. So thank you all very much for listening to us. We hope that you will support this project for its benefits to Canterbury, and we'd like to take your questions now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. I've been over and had a look at the piece of land, and I think it's a fantastic strategic piece in terms of the harbour protection. So great work to everyone in the community. Who would like to ask a question? Councillor Ian McKenzie.
So just in terms of the current ownership and what will happen should you not be able to secure the ownership of the land, what is the future for it if you don't secure it with the Rod Island Trust Office?
We are in an unconditional sale and purchase agreement. We will take possession of the land on the 1st of July. What this is about is gathering partner support so that the Rod Donald Trust doesn't have to use up all of its reserves to put into this block. So that's why we're trying to form a partnership arrangement, and that will leave Rod Donald Trust money for the next project. It won't bankrupt us, or not quite bankrupt us, that's an exaggeration, but it won't, really. But we are putting a large chunk into this.
And just a supplementary question, if I may, that certainly when I was a young fellow, all the summits of the peninsula were designated as paper roads, so access to the summits has never been an issue, but you say this is to secure access. Is that just by a particular route?
It's not correct that there are paper roads to all the summits on Banks Peninsula. There is a huge network of paper roads on Banks Peninsula. Some of them are in useful places and some aren't. Some parts of the Te Aropataka tramping network do fall on unformed legal road, but not the summit of Mount Herbert and not the summit of Mount Bradley. And so how we initially became involved in this was because we were seeking to protect the public access on those existing tracts, which completely rely on informal gentleman's agreement, the goodwill of the current landowner, and that could be lost on a land ownership change. And so we were seeking easements, and then the landowner said to us, well, actually, I'm breaking up the farm now. I'd rather sell you the land, and that opened the opportunity for this marvellous biodiversity project.
Councillor Lam-Fan.
Thanks very much for formally coming to us with this today. As a governor alongside our co-chair on Whakaora, Whakaraupo, this could not be more exciting or more significant in terms of Ki Tai restoration, and I just want to thank you for the vision in bringing this to us in the community to share in. That's really cool. I know that Cynthia's been acknowledged as a past councillor, but particularly today, I just want to highlight again your leadership in the biodiversity area, and I hope you'll be able to see in our LTP that we're really building on that. So thank you. My question was around the funding, and thank you for being really clear about what you're asking for today. Is there any timelines on, like I see that you're getting close to the goal. Do you have a timeline in mind for when you might basically secure that? I mean, we're thinking, for example, with the long-term plan, would that be year 1 or year 2, for example?
Sorry, thank you for that good question, Lan. We did come and see Nadine Domis back last winter, and it was as a result of discussions with her that we set that settlement date to the 1st of July. So it did tip into the next financial year and could be included in long-term plans. So I think in terms of time frame from the Rod Donald Trust point of view, next year's long-term plan is fine. We're not looking for funding in this financial year. And any funding, any commitment towards the project will enable us to include ECAN as a partner. The Rod Donald Trust, if it needs to be in 2022 or something, the Rod Donald Trust can bridge that gap in the meantime. So what we're looking for is to be able to put ECAN's name on the documents as a supporting partner. we're flexible on timeframes, but 1st of July would be great.
However, if there's any money left over in this year's budget,
Yeah. Good point, Cynthia.
Have you got something to say, Vicky?
A really, a really quick question about how you're obviously going out to the public. We do have our own networks out into the public as well. I saw some early publicity around this pre-Christmas. You're heading towards that goal and that date. How can we elevate or help you, and how are you going about elevating that publicity to get more public into this great project? We have just launched our relaunched our post-Christmas campaign. You might have seen it on the front page in a banner ad of the press Tuesday. It's out this week. We have a lot of media going out about this again. So we are getting out to the public. We'd love it if you could put something in your ECAN newsletter or a link on your website. I'd like to maybe talk with the staff about that. That would be incredibly helpful. And so, yes, you will see quite a lot more media about this. So we're having our second wave.
but just particularly because you and some of the other councillors are part of the Banks Peninsula zone, it'd be great if even in your own networks you let people know.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we'll just take one last person now. So I'd like to invite Tumu Taiao, Yvette Couch-Lewis.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora and thank you for this presentation. And I'm really just speaking to encourage support for this, because the whakaora plan is the partnership we have within Environment Canterbury. And this is definitely, as you can see, in terms of our plan, the support and growth that will actually come through using the whakaora plan and this great project of securing the ownership of this land. So thank you for coming, and and I hand over now to Tumu Taiao again.
Kia ora koutou. Just acknowledging the work of Rod Donald Trust, work you did with making Te Ara Pātiki, Te Ara Pātaka and the walkways, working with the Runanga to get that name and working forward on that one. As you know, Te Ara Pātiki is the, as you said, the tallest area on the peninsula and connected to all the marae, not just on Ngāti Wheke, but there's also the south, the east, and west, and other sides of the Te Ara Pātiki. I'm just acknowledging that I heard Richard talk about the O&Ls, but it's also the cultural landscapes as well, and that working with Ngāti Wheke, because they're on this side of the harbour, is Kaitiaki, but also that this mountain, Te Ahu Pātiki, my personal belief is that Mount Herbert and Mount Bradley, they're not separate, they are one. So it is a Te Ahu Pātiki layered on one on top of one another, and doesn't matter where you are on the peninsula, you can see that image, especially from Te Waihora. Just that really working with Ngāti Wheke, but also the other marae as well, on the protection of those cultural landscapes, because they are very important to who we are, and it's part of our mihi and also our proverbs, etc. about that, that on the peninsula and parts of the general. So, but on behalf of just Tumu Taiao, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much. And just before you leave the table, I'd like to remove that we received the information from the Ron Donald Banks Peninsula Trust, and we're going to refer that matter to the CEO to reply. So I'll move that. Is there a councillor that would like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much, and we've loved having you. Thank you so much for giving up your time to come. Now I'd like to welcome Grant Davey to the table. Grant's come to talk to us about bird disturbance in the Ashley Rakahui River and river management. So welcome, Grant.
Yep, I'll start again. Hello, everybody. I'm trying to set a very large topic, which is the plight of the Canterbury foothills fed braided rivers in a very short time, so I'm going to be quick. I'm with Braid and Ashley Rakahuri River Care Group, so I'm obviously going to be talking mainly about the birds. I'm not going to say any more about those groups because I think everybody's aware of them. So basically what I'm talking about is how here and everywhere else around the world, braided rivers are being turned basically through management from good braided rivers into single channels. This example here is from Romania, but I could have found examples from all around the world. So early on, 1891, good braided river. Now it's a single channel. It's happening here. So what is special about Canterbury's braided rivers is not the rivers themselves. There's actually lots of braided rivers around the world. It's the braided river specialist birds. And we seem to have more of those here than there are elsewhere in the world. And they rely on bare gravel and braided rivers to breed to varying extents. The bird we're most worried about is the black-fronted tern, which seems to have very poor breeding success. We're going to first look at the Ashley and see why in places it's still pretty good for birds and what makes it so before I go to the Opigi where things are a lot worse. So on this map, each triangle represents a bird or several birds located accurately on these drone maps from 20 weekly bird surveys. And you can see to the right and to the left, there are a lot of birds, and that's because those sections of the river are braided. They have the right nesting habitat on islands, which the birds require to keep safe from a number of the predator species, and they prefer to nest on those islands. Also, the feeding habitat in the braided sections is much better than the single channel sections, one of which you can see in the middle there, where very few braided birds venture. The feeding must be worse. There's still bare gravel for them to nest on, but they also do not like being close to trees. So unsurprisingly, braided river birds require braided rivers. And habitat is our main problem in the Ashley and almost certainly the other rivers. And an illustration of this is this graph here, where the grey is the amount of bare gravel, which is nesting habitat, and the bars are the number of birds. So when we've got lots of bare gravel, we've got quite a few birds. When we get a weed infestation, the bird numbers drop. And what's quite worrying is over to the right here, we had a big flood in 2017 and the bird numbers didn't recover. But definitely habitat is the main problem, not predators, not human disturbance. So one of the reasons why we have enough bare gravel, which we have a fairly sustainable bird population at the moment, is because we clear islands of weeds. About 40 hectares was cleared by machine last year with ECAM funding, and we need to do more in the next season because the weed problems got worse. And why is the Opigi such Opigi? I come from down there, so I've still got the old pronunciation. Why is it such a poor habitat? When you look at the international literature, it says that braided river environments are being damaged due to what I've classified into three main classifications: by restriction of rivers, stop banks, tree planting and uncontrolled expansion of weeds, deepening of the channels and channelization by excessive gravel extraction, and effects of dams and excessive water abstraction. We actually have all of this in the Opigi. Going back to 1938-39, it was actually a really quite a good braided river, and I would have expected there to be quite a lot of birds, braided river birds, nesting along this river then. It was already damaged, exotic trees and gorse and brome, but it should have been a good bird habitat. This is in 1977, which is just a few years after new stop banks were put in by the Catchment Board, and lots more trees had been planted, and it severely restricted the river and basically turned it into a single channel. You can see places there where there are some smaller additional channels, but it's basically just a single channel. I would think this would have affected the bird numbers based on what we can see in the Ashley fairly severely. Click forward to today, and we've got the river with the same sort of channel, single channel, here and there some small islands, but basically single channel, and now it is covered in weeds. That really is not a braided river bird habitat at all. And this is a view from the ground. Last season, there were 2 attempts to do an ECAN annual bird survey, which were cancelled due to flood and bacteria in the water. But we might as well not have bothered. We may have found birds where there was some gravel extraction, but otherwise they will not go to places like this. And the weeds have a longer term effect. They're proven to evolve the river into a single thread channel. Big floods will temporarily fix it, but they're quite rare. So I don't have bird counts from before and after that channelization event, but I can compare the bird numbers between the Opigi and Ashley for the same years. And these graphs the same scale. The only difference is this is counts for 32 kilometres along the Opigi and 19 kilometres along the Ashley. So in the Ashley, we had many more birds. We have wrybill, no wrybill seen in these 4 counts in the Opigi. Quite consistently, our most abundant species in the Ashley is the banded dotterel. In the Opigi, they're almost non-existent, which is extremely worrying. And unfortunately, I'd have to say this really wasn't an accident. OP River Works objectives for the South Canterbury Catchment Board and Environment Canterbury basically were to straighten and constrict the channel and take gravel out in the interest of flood protection. And it is recognised in this report that the river now flows in a sinuous, generally single thread pattern. This really is a textbook example of how constriction of a braided river, extracting gravel and allowing rampant weed growth, basically destroys the essential braided river characteristics of this river. We go back to the Ashley. It's not quite as rosy as I made out in those 2 initial slides. This river is still deteriorating, and I don't think lessons have been learned. So this here on the top left is the Ashley about 10 kilometres upstream from Rangiora in 1942, and on the right in 2018. So the river here has been, well, it's not as simple as it looks. There's ECAN pine forest planted there from the 1990s. They wouldn't have planted it on the actual active riverbed, but we had a long period of low flows which dropped sand in that area, and then that part of the riverbed seems to have been thought of as wasteland. So pine forest was planted there, but it's fixed this narrowness in place, and you can see that some trees, some poplar trees and things have been planted to stop the pine forest from being eroded away. The thing is, when you narrow a river like this, you don't just have a narrower river which is of the same characteristics. When you're putting that same amount of water through a narrower zone, it speeds up. And instead of a nice interplay between erosion and deposition, you get a lot more erosion and the river eating down. And that narrows it. And it also causes it to, the faster water causes it to straighten, which speeds it up again, which causes more incision. When you've got a narrowing river, you get more scope for weeds to grow. And when the river floods out of that single channel and goes out onto the burn, it drops sand, which promotes more weeds, which also act towards constricting the river. So you're kicking off a series of nasty positive feedback loops, which are very difficult to recover from. But in 1942, 81% of the river length was braided. Now we've got 60% braided. And the width of the fairway seems to have been declining really quite steadily since 1942. And as far as I can see, it is actually still declining very slowly, not that you can notice, but come back in 10 years and you find that it's narrower and it's less braided. So there's some particularly damaging practices which are still happening. Early in 1920, there were 2 fires in the pine forests, and in both places that pine forest was replanted with protection measures put in place to protect the pine trees. There's these pole planted poplars along the edge of the river to stop pine forest from being eroded away. Now this is up to 400 metres away from the stop bank. This is not flood protection measures, this is protecting the pine forest. From what I've learned from reading the international literature, I would have taken at this stage the opportunity to allow the river come and help the river to come through here and turn it from what is here basically a single channel into a multiple channel again and improve the natural characteristics of the river. The other damaging practice is how gravel extraction is being carried out. In recent years, it's more and more gone to digging straight, deep channels, which are really quite damaging. I noticed that the latest gravel extraction is not like that. It's more of the beach skimming, where you take a thin layer across quite a wide area, and that seems to be quite a bit less damaging. And I don't see enough acknowledgement that when you take gravel from somewhere in the river, it affects the rest of the river, both upstream and downstream. And over time, the river, with the confinement effects and the gravel extraction effects, has been incising more. So this is looking down on that upstream gravel extraction area during a small flood. And what you can see is an unnatural environment. You've got a deep excavated channel along here, which is very straight, unnaturally high islands. And I can't see how this is going to change in the near future. Braided rivers, by definition, active channels move backwards and forward across the riverbed. And they need to do that to regenerate the gravel, to clear off the sand, to clear off the weeds and make places for birds to nest. So, but in the short term, the gravel mining is very good for the birds. You can see lots of birds nested here. But in the long term, it helps destroy the braided character of rivers. So the operators who did this tag it an absolute class act. They do what they're told by ECAN, and they genuinely care for the environment. They cleared at their own cost all of this area here of weeds, which really wasn't of benefit to their operation. But a lot of the other gravel extractors seem to be cowboys. So what we think is, along these rivers, management is really too dominated by river engineers doing flood protection. We realise that flood protection is utterly important because this and the other rivers are very dangerous rivers, but it does not appear to be proper environmental oversight. There should be much more environmental thought going into what is going on in these rivers. And the long-term cumulative effects of what is being done need to be recognised and mitigated. So in the resource consent process, the extractors are not allowed to disturb the birds, and that's done really well. They're not allowed to drive in the river. They're not allowed to take gravel from the water and that sort of thing. But the long-term cumulative effects do not seem to be properly recognised. Urgent action is needed on the weeds. A lot of these rivers are totally clogged with weeds. We shouldn't be planting pine trees in riverbeds. The gravel consents, I come from a mining background, do not appear to me to be really up to standard. This is mining. It's not tooth extraction. There's other ways to protect the stop banks than tree planting. And in places to bring rivers back to where the birds will come back, particularly on the overhead. You're going to have to make islands, to channel the river around areas where birds can possibly nest, or that river will just not be a braided river bird environment. I think that's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation, Grant. There's lots of good advice in there, I think. Grant, are you got a question?
Yeah, just a quick observation. Council is aware that we are committed to what we call a braided river revival project that is looking at the natural character elements of the river and the whole of the river ecology. So it's a whole of river approach. And the Ashley Rakahuri is the first project that we're getting off the ground, and that work's already underway. So, you know, the stuff that's put together is really useful, and I'm sure that staff at a later date will come and have a further discussion with you about your findings and the work you're doing and your concerns about that. It's just a question, a minor question, but the raking of the gravel, has that been successful? I know that you've sort of been getting some funding through the zone committee, and it was a trial, so you found that.
Yeah, but the machine really based design doesn't really do the job. Just have to do it. Did everybody hear that? Sorry. Yeah. So it's working really well, and we can efficiently clear quite large areas of gravel. And we did get success with where the birds were nesting last season, but it seems that they need really quite large areas. You clear say 1 hectare, and it's unlikely to be successful. You need several hectares to bring the birds in. So yeah, we are aware of what's going on, but it seems to be reasonably slow, and I'm not sure that enough resources have been put into it. So yeah, we've been talking to David Owen, we've been to the field with him, but we haven't seen anything as yet.
Councillor Craig Portland.
Kia ora, Grant. Tuatahi a tēnei timi ki a koe mō kōrero ki a mātou I tēnei ata. Just thank you for your presentation. I must admit, while I'm a massive fan of our native biodiversity, indigenous flora and fauna, I have never known much about braided river birds, although a lot of people have told me about them, but I've learnt more this morning than I've heard for all my life. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for your great presentation, actually, the amount of information you brought us, you know, the detail of what you've done, the monitoring, etc. So it really made me learn a lot and about the issues that are facing the birds, and of course the river and the habitat that you have explained. So just want to acknowledge you for that. And I had a couple of questions. One was up there, you've got about methods other than trees to protect stop banks. So I'm interested in what that would be. So that's one question. And then maybe what would be the number one thing out of the conclusions, recommendations you've made that you'd like to see the number one out of your list? Push your button. It's all right, Grant.
Yep. What I'm talking about here is not unknown in New Zealand. In the Rangitikei River up in the North Island in 1983, they were losing the braided character of the river, and they realised that constriction and gravel extraction was the main problem. And so they tried to constrict the river less by not using trees, I understand, by putting riprap along the stop banks. So I'm sure everything else is more expensive, but that is one option. And basically, I just want to see more environmental oversight on what's being done, and the urgent action is needed on the weeds. So I just here I'd like to acknowledge Nick Ledyard, who's the chairman of both these groups here, and he can't be here today. But if anyone wants to go to the river and look at some of these things, contact us, and you're very welcome. And I know I'm being critical of ECAN, but we have good relations with with the divisions in ECAN. We're talking, particularly with the rangers. We're talking with the river engineers. So I don't want to be too overly critical with what I'm saying.
Oh, thank you very much, Grant. We'll just take it as constructive information that you've got to share with us, and we're aware that our staff have been working really constructively with the groups around the birds. So thank you for that. Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie has another, just before you leave, she's got a question.
Yeah, maybe a question, comment. Yeah, I find it pretty upsetting because I'm in the same area, in the Upper Heath area. And I guess what's interesting, I've been attending many of the river rating group meetings, and the farmers are actually, some of the farmers are starting to say similar things around the upper reaches of the rivers. Could we slow the water down? I noticed the UK are actually starting to do that. They're starting to actually remove their old drainage sort of tanks and things like that in the upper reaches. I do still see there is quite a bit of siloing. You know, our flood engineers are still quite separate from other bits of the organisation, but our Braided River program is what is hopefully is going to bring those things together, those people together, and perhaps what I would like to know is, what do you think about having perhaps more wetlands instead of plantings and stop banks on the margins as a flood control measure with that? Yeah. The other thing, I suppose, which I wonder, I guess this is more a question for our CEO, is what measures Thank you, Elizabeth. I'll just ask CEO Stephanie for a comment, because I know that that's work that's currently underway.
It is underway, and Grant, thank you for acknowledging the staff and the relationship that I know that you do have with them. And this has been a journey. It's a journey of change, and it is underway. It's a maturing journey. The comments made by Councillor Edge with regard to the Braided River Revival, and then councillors as well going out with their LTP later today, all feed into that. My executive officer is in the room, and my suggestion is that we take all of the feedback that we've gotten, and clearly communication and enhanced working together is a key part of those next steps. To you, Chair.
Yes, I have to let you know that I grew up in the North Canterbury, and Braided River beds were very much part of my life. It goes from having been there for a few generations, but my father and his brothers, after World War II, part of their job creation scheme was to extract gravel for both ballast for the railway and gravel. So I've been in many riverbeds, and members of my family have sat in the riverbeds and written their PhD on our birds and our braided riverbeds. So I feel really connected to what you're saying, and really acknowledge you for all the work and for coming here today, because you only have to drive up in North Canterbury, where I've driven a lot since I was born, basically. And it's just changed, and all those things are affecting the birds. So thank you very much for all the work you're doing, and all the other people in your groups. I think it's fantastic. So we're going to move a resolution now, and I'll move from the chair and invite someone to second it, that the council receives the information from Grant, from you, and refers the matters to the chief executive to investigate and reply. So seconded by Councillor Grant Edge. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? No. So that's carried. So thank you very much for taking up your time today and coming in.
Yep, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Now we return to the minutes. We're up to item 5 on the agenda. Is there anybody has noticed anything about the minutes that we need to correct? I think we're covering that in another section. So who would like to move this resolution? Who would? John. Councillor John Sunkel is moving the resolution to confirm that there's the correct record of the meeting held on the 10th of December Have I got a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Claire Mackay. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. Matters arising, I'll just ask our CEO to outline the responses we have sent to past submitters.
Thank you, Chair. On the 18th of December, we did send a letter to Peter Joyce and Letitia Lamb with regard to their deputation on Te Ara Kakariki. We congratulated them with regard to the 100,000th seedling and the 100th green dot site, and encouraged them as well to submit on the long-term plan once released. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right. Any comments on that? I think it's really good to get that on the record. So thank you very much, Stephanie. Committee reports. We're on to item 7.1.1, the Regulation and Hearing Committee. Councillor Claire Mackay will present it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the paper as read there, and page, what is it, page 29 in your agenda. I assume those numbers are the same, are they?
Yeah.
That's what I've got online. Yeah, thank you very much. A couple of points I'd just like to note that under the recommendations there, that we will be receiving now confirmed minutes with a slight amendment into the 4th of February minutes there, where Tumu Taiao, Ebet, Couch Lewis was an apology. So I would also like to note that at our previous council meeting, I raised the fact that the Regional Hearing Committee would be going back and making a correction to previously approved minutes on the 29th of October, and that was done within the Regional the Regulation Hearing Committee. I don't think I probably need to expand any further. They're quite straightforward, and the decision processes that we were involved in there were around appointing hearing commissioners for objections and applications. So unless anybody has any questions, comments they'd like to make, then not being any questions or comments, I, Madam Chair, would like to move those recommendations that are on page 29, that we receive the confirmed minutes of the Regulation Hearing Committee meeting held 3rd of December, confirmed minutes held of the 28th of January, and now the confirmed minutes for the 4th of February.
Okay, I've called for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Nicole Marshall. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on now, we're up to the Canterbury Water Management Strategy Regional Committee. It's on page 39 of your agenda, and we'll ask Councillor Mackay to speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, I'll take this item on the Regional Committee as read, and you'll notice there that we are to receive the unconfirmed minutes for the meeting of Canterbury Water Management Strategy for the Regional Committee held on the 8th of December. The complete agenda is attached there, and as I said, I'll take that as read. One thing I would just like to note that the Regional Committee meeting that was scheduled for the 16th, I think if my memory serves me correctly, has been postponed to a later date. So is there any comments or questions anybody would have regard to these?
Yeah, Councillor Pauling.
Just wanted to draw people's attention to the 6.4 in the minutes. Just really great insights from our regional committee members about things that they've worked through over the last 10 years. Been on the committee, a lot of the members have been there since the start. So just draw your attention to that. And there's a bit of change. After this meeting. At our last council meeting, we adopted a change to the regional committee. So that's coming, and we're still working on that to go through. So just want to acknowledge that. So
thank you. So it's moved by Councillor Claire Mackay that we receive the minutes. I'll call for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. All those in favour, please say aye. There being no one against, that's carried. Thank you very much. We're up to 7.2, continuing with statutory, or moving on to statutory committees. We've got civil defence, emergency management. I'd like to ask Councillor Sunkel to speak to this on page 47. Oh, sorry, 46, is it?
Thank you for that. These are the unconfirmed minutes. We cancelled our meeting in February due to the business of mayors on their grand tour of regional transport. I draw your note to 2 points in the report. One is the continuation of resurgence planning, which was obviously put into place with the change in the COVID levels of late. That work continues, so up and down. So we are, as civil defence, prepared for any eventuality that might happen. And the other point I draw your note to is the long-term plan conversation that was had at civil defence and the actions from that flowing through into our long-term plan. Any questions?
Councillor Phil Clearwater.
Thanks, John. I just wondered if you could clarify from, and I appreciate the minutes haven't been confirmed by the group, but just around what the review and recommend your resolution 2 is going, the group plan review, what that's going to entail, not exactly scope, but just, I guess my main question is that also going to, is it going to be a full review, or is it actually around the concept of regionalisation alone?
It's a mixture of regionalisation and a review of our services in light of what we believe is coming from NEMA and the national organisation. The conversation was to front foot and continue the work and understanding so that we were as well placed as possible for any of those recommendations that come out of the national office. So it's a mix of the two.
A follow-up question, if I may. So just with that in mind, since one of the national strategies goals is to increase community awareness and participation and understanding, do you think the review will also include those community goals in the plan?
Again, this is a regional view and review of the overarching body. Civil defence, as I have stated before, is the responsibility of the local territorial authorities to have that communication with their communities. It's not to say that we do not and will not communicate, but the actual role of civil defence that rests with the territorial authorities.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a quick question around AF8, John, on page 51. The second item that was resolved, the funding for 100, is it $100,000? Is a zero missing?
It is an extra $100,000 for those items listed in that paragraph. So it's not 100 per item. It was an increase in expenditure across all those work streams.
So that process, John, will that go through the next 6 months? And, are you listening?
Yep.
So my question is that process that you're talking about AF8, because I'm pretty interested in that. Will that go through the next, when will that review happen? Is
that review is ongoing. Southland Civil Defence had the early lead with developing the understanding, the research and the science with that. I think that's now been transferred to one of the other regions. So it's an ongoing piece of work within the South Island to bring an understanding to what might happen and then the planning that rolls around that.
Councillor Edge.
Yeah, just clarification, Councillor Sunkel, on Councillor the previous comment. The review process, just for me, the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group presumably has oversight of the territorial authority work. How does that work? In which case, surely they're communicating with each other.
Yes, they communicate with each other. It's symbiotic. One does not have a particular hierarchy over the other. So if an event arises and a civil defence emergency is declared by the Territorial Authority of Ashburton, and it is limited to Ashburton, Ashburton are in control. If the event then covers more than one district or is at a certain magnitude, the regional office may step in and provide assistance and offer work and people, but not take over. So it's a symbiotic. So the regional grouping sits over the top, provides the governance and the guidance to ensure that the TAs have their work in place, but it's not hierarchical in that the region controls the TAs.
Okay, so it seems that the question about the TAs and the community issues has been asked a few times. Is there any other thing we can do there to help out, do you think?
As general awareness, the group controller, Neville Riley, is well aware of the communication and the work that needs to be done, but it is the responsibility of the TAs to communicate. The conversation with Christchurch and regionalisation is that Christchurch has 20-something staff involved with civil defence and are nervous about regionalisation. We say to them, you have your 20-something staff that are the front-facing people who front into the community, do the preparedness, do the conversations, make people aware. It is not the role of the region. You can go to the Mackenzie country where there may be half a person working in that role, but the role really sits with the territorial authorities to do the work on the ground and have those communications.
Rob.
Look, I thank you, John, and like I guess we have asked for that kind of information from the TAs, and I'd really like to understand what is really being done around that goal of community in the whole vision statement that the group, the emergency management group, plan here, because I really don't know, and I would hope, Madam Chair, through the council, that be part of the review, that we get some understanding of achieving, for example, the goals. And one, for example, is that residents and visitors know how to help each other in the event of an emergency. That's all I'm really asking for. How, for example, is our region structured for that? And I've got no doubt that local areas, for example, like Lake Oval, that recently they really rose the occasion and managed. I guess I certainly have a concern about that when we have a possible another Port Horse fire, how in fact our residents will be able to manage together. So I'm going to be really interested to know, to see that aspect of what is a clear goal is included in the review.
Okay. Can I ask then that a note be made for an item on the next regional committee meeting to have that clarity? And I think the answers to your question, Phil, come out of Christchurch City Council and Selwyn District. They don't come out of the region, but we will ask for that clarification.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, John. All right, so any other questions, or shall we move on? So this is moved, the resolution is being moved by Councillor Thunkel that we receive the unconfirmed minutes of the Canterbury Civil Defence and Emergency Management Joint Committee held on the 27th of November 2020, seconded by Councillor Nicole Marshall. All those in favour, please say aye. That being carried. Thank you very much. We're going on now to joint committee reports, and this is on page 52 of the agenda, the Greater Christchurch Partnership. And would you like to say a few words about that meeting, Phil?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you all councillors might assist me. But it was the main part of that meeting, which was back in December last year, was really around endorsing the problem and benefit statements, so that in fact they could be passed to NZTA in relation to the mass rapid transit business case. And that exercise of actually defining the problem was in fact is extremely important. So in fact, central government eventually know what we are asking for. So, but basically, I'll just recap those problems and some of the benefits, and others might add to that. But one, that are around the whole mass rapid transit case, one of the main problems, one was the current and forecast settlement patterns that perpetuate high car dependence, and that's increased transport costs. And one of the benefits which we are put to the NZTA following the mass rapid transit plan, is to be an increased number of households and jobs within 800 metres of high frequency public transport. The second problem is that public transport system is not sufficiently attractive to compete with private vehicles, and a KPI in the future of that will be a more competitive journey times between public transport and private vehicles, especially for residents who live along the corridor. And the third but important problem was continuation of the current transport system fails our climate change responsibilities and leads to poorer public health outcomes. And one of the results we would expect from this, not just from the study, but from the whole project, is reduced greenhouse gas emissions from transport for Greater Christchurch. And on top of that, improved air quality and better public health outcomes, but particularly for the households who are along that corridor. So others might like to add to what was discussed.
Thank you. Councillor Edge, have you got a comment?
Just to comment on some other items that were discussed at that particular meeting as well. There was a presentation regarding the Christchurch, Greater Christchurch 2050 work. They'd been undertaking some workshops in November and also some survey information. And so that was also presented, and they're available for councillors wish to look at those as well. But they provided a good summary of what future vision that people, or future issues that people going forward needed to be considered.
Thank you, Councillor Edge. Any questions about that? All right, that is moved by Councillor Phil Clearwater and seconded by Councillor Edge, that we receive the unconfirmed minutes from the partnership meeting on the 11th of December. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? No, obviously not. Thank you very much. That's carried. Matters for council decision now. We will move to item 8.2, which is the climate change resilience update. And that's on page 69. Because we're going to take the other reports a little bit later. Vicky, Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Southwood, would you like to present this item?
So obviously it's a really important thing that Environment Canterbury is working on with climate change. We've declared a climate change emergency in the past and are working to enhance our visibility and also our action around this work. One of the things that's currently on the agenda is, or on our radar, is of course the Climate Change Commission's draft advice currently, and so we are looking at developing a submission on that, and that's something that we're working on as a council, and we'll bring that submission at a later date.
Yeah, and the other area that we're working on is we're actually engaging very closely with central government on climate change. There are many bits of legislation that they're drafting. So our staff are drafting submissions to bring to council on the national direction on greenhouse gas emissions and on the national emissions reduction plan, and also most importantly on the national adaptation plan, which actually needs to be in place by 2022. So that's moving quite rapidly. I'd just like to ask if the staff have anything to add in this area, any more detail that they want to add. That's all right? Okay, cool.
All right, well, it's moved by, any questions? Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you for that, and to the staff for doing the summary report, and we look forward to what our submission is going to be. But just with that in mind, I've just really wondered, in fact, and I've indicated at the previous meeting, as to whether, in fact, we as a council in our submission are going to be sufficiently proactive. And like an example is that there's been some constructive criticism of the Climate Change Commission report, which you'll be aware of, that in fact makes it quite clear that the projections really are based on what is currently being done, or what could be done in the near future around reducing emissions, rather than really looking in the longer term
is to include, for example, new technologies and how, in fact, we might really expand more on what the Climate Commission is recommending. And that doesn't go against what the whole Commission report, because of course they want constructive criticism too. But I just wondered if you might like to comment on how our future, the future submission we make might also take those, I guess, criticisms, if you like, constructive ones, into account.
My understanding is that these submissions are coming to council for everyone to consider, and so that we can raise those issues there. I would just ask the staff if you could comment on the question from Councillor Paul.
So in terms of your question, so how the future submissions will take constructive criticism into account. So it will be a similar process to that we've taken you through so far for the Climate Change Commission submission, where we would come to you with draft submissions, get your feedback before and take that into account before we're drafting it for final submission.
In terms of the specifics of what we would like to see, in fact, there's going to be good opportunity still for us to actually ask for those kinds of considerations eventually.
So we're bringing the council submission through to the next council meeting on the 11th of March. The Climate Change Commission previously had made the closing submissions date to the 15th of March. So just email correspondence, that's now been extended by 2 weeks. So there'll be an opportunity for councillors to feed into formally into that submission through a council meeting process on the 11th. And it's just the things we can make ahead of submission. The submissions that are the national direction that's outlined is information that will be coming through from central government in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. So we'll have sessions with councillors throughout this year, briefing you on those pieces of work and developing submissions. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for those councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, did you have another question?
Just to point out that notwithstanding your question, Councillor Clearwater, in terms of submission process, I think we were reminded by our CEO earlier on in the day that we need to keep this at a reasonably high level. I think the engagement process that we take from there on, particularly given when we hand our submission forward or we'll speak to our submission, which is really important that we do that and seek time to be able to do that properly, is an opportunity to actually put some of those more finer views on the table. So that's one.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming up. That's great. Thanks for giving us that extra information. Councillor Southworth, did you want to make a further comment?
Just to add as well, this is really the starting point of what will be a cyclic system where, you know, it seems to me sensible to be looking at what can we actually know we can do now, and the budgets are being built in, I think it's 5-year blocks. And obviously as technology improves and we have more certainty around what alternatives might come along down the line, you know, there'll be a series of opportunities as we go forward to continue to push and drive for that future innovation and change in tech and adapting to what comes ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. I'll call Councillor. I'll move the resolution that we receive the information. Moved by Councillor Liz McKenzie and seconded by Councillor Vicky Southworth. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. We've got one more, 8.3, which is the submission on the water services bill, which is on page 71. I'll ask Councillor Peter Scott to speak to this, please.
Madam Chair, I think we've agreed that Councillor Mackay.
I was going to move it. You were going to speak to it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Where you go?
Sorry.
You want to move it?
You want to speak?
You speak to it first.
Look, I'm sorry about the confusion for people that are listening and watching. We're usually a wee bit more organised than this, but I am actually going to prepare to front the submission once it goes before the health committee. But it's pretty straightforward in terms of this. It is a significantly important piece of legislation because it will change the face of how the three waters are delivered across New Zealand. We've got the stand-up legislation there for Te Mata Arawai at the moment. This gives the teeth to Te Mata Arawai to be able to get on with their business. It is quite an emotional, tense subject. We have spent some time, I guess, making it pretty clear where we stand and what our concerns are. And although we won't cover all those things in our submission, we hope to be able to extend the time available to us in front of the health committee to be able to put those views in place. And I know Councillor Edge and I know Councillor Sunkel have got some detail that they would like to put in front of those people hearing submission. So that's all I've really got to say on that.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Does anybody else want to make a comment? Oh, Councillor Edge.
Yes, just referring to item 3 of the proposed submission. I'm just wondering if we can elaborate a little bit more, elaborate and consider a bit more our role in addressing groundwater quality, especially as it's the primary source of water for private and community wells. And it would be good to understand what the Commission's view is on that as a significant water source. And yeah, if we could note in our submission somewhere along the line that we can ask for some more time during the verbal submission process to actually discuss that issue for clarification. What is the definition of source water? I think it's pretty important and the responsibility or assistance for those boreholders that have no control about the health of that ground.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. And my note is to, I guess, clause 25, the acceptable solution of rural agricultural drinking water. That paragraph is a few big words, and I guess it speaks of the financial implication. That the challenge for me is a farm may have a water supply that supplies more than one building, which then brings the regulatory process into play. If it's a very simple process, that's fine. But as we understand at the moment, the bar is very, very high for a supplier of water. So my challenge in there is to see where government actually sits. Are they meaning to capture every farm that supplies 2 houses into a bureaucratic process? Or is there a line that can be drawn to say on a farm with 3 or 4 houses, they fall outside the ruling? So whilst I won't move an amendment, I just feel that paragraph probably didn't quite articulate the challenge. It's not just the financial, it's also the bureaucratic, but we will have the opportunity to speak to it. Thank you.
Thank you. So turning to the resolutions then, Councillor Claire Mackay will move that we agree that the council makes a submission, and the second point of the recommendation is that we agree that Councillor Peter Scott will appear in support of the submission, and that's why he's not moving the resolution. And point 3, that we approve pending any change required by council the submission to be submitted to the health committee on the 2nd of March. And I think we note those 2 notes that will be taken cognizance of during the submission process at the discretion of the CEO. So thank you. So it's moved by Councillor Claire Mackay, seconded by Councillor Nicole Marshall. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. Now we are moving on. From that, we're moving on to our reports from the Water Zone committees. So I'd really like to welcome Gina Weibel and Les Bonhala. I see you there at the moment, and we'll take the report from the Banks Peninsula Zone Committee first, I think, Gina. If you both want to come to the table, that's fine. We'll take your one first. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Benita Wakefield, who's our chair, was unwell today and so wasn't able to make it. So I'm the deputy chair for Banks Peninsula. The zone committee had a good year last year with minimal disruption from COVID. We approved 4 excellent projects from the Immediate Steps Biodiversity Fund and continue to have more projects put forward than can be funded in the current year. We're very pleased to have been the first zone committee to co-opt a youth member, with Irina Riddle from the Youth Ropu joining the committee. She's been with us for a year now. We've continued to work through what is coming up to our 3rd year in our 3-year action plan, and the committee is looking forward to working to the new terms of reference following the zone committee review last year. We feel that the new terms of reference do support the direction that we've been going as a committee. Going forward, the committee are trialling an approach that will focus our resources on 3 catchments for a set period of time, rather than our previous approach that attempted to cover the whole peninsula, which resulted in a bit of a scattergun approach. So we're hoping that by targeting our resources like this, that will have better Kitai outcomes to the chosen catchments and get better landowner and community engagement. One community where we already have good engagement and a high turnout to our annual zone committee meetings that we hold in the area is Wainui in Akaroa Harbour. We'd love to see that in other catchments as well. Wainui has been the focus of a septic tank study with findings released last year, where they found high levels of fecal contamination in the lower catchment, but only a minor contribution from human sources, with the majority being from birds and a lesser degree from stock. Interviews with residents found that many septic systems are old, and uncertainty over City Council plans to reticulate wastewater in the area is making residents reluctant to invest in maintenance and upgrades. Lastly, the committee were pleased to be able to provide early input to the LTP with a letter sent to ECAN in November last year. The committee's top priorities are biodiversity funding for immediate steps, but also bigger picture projects, for example, like the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust's Te Kakukura project that seeks to create 1,000-hectare biodiversity hub across the Port Hills. Implementation of the Whakaora Whakaraupo Catchment Management Plan in Littleton Harbour, with an emphasis on erosion and sediment control, particularly roadside cuttings. Implementation of the Wairiwa Sub-Regional Plan, the ZIPA recommendations, including ongoing funding for the Wairiwa Stream Bank Stabilisation Project. To secure community funding, community and farm water supplies while retaining ecosystem health. This includes funding preparation work towards a plan change to enable more realistic and responsive management of streams and water takes on Banks Peninsula. And that ECAN and CCC jointly fund staff time to support and advise landowners for effective management of on-site wastewater systems, as well as promoting mahinga kai recovery through increased funding to fish barrier removal, risk assessment for adaptation to climate change, particularly in relation to freshwater ecosystem health, and weed management to protect biodiversity. That's all I have for today.
Thank you very much, Gina. Would anybody like to ask any questions or make a comment? Councillor Pauling.
Kia ora, tēnā koe, Gina. Thanks for the report. Yeah, awesome to hear that last list there of things looking forward. It's awesome to hear. There's so much focus. I had a question just there. You mentioned the 3. I've got 2 questions. First one, just the 3 catchments that you're looking to focus on. Have you decided on them yet?
Yes. Yes, so I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. I think it was Goffs, Iraqi, and one other.
And My other question, there's a comment, and I don't know if you can answer this. In the key achievements, there's a note there about soil mapping, and that ECAN and MB were involved in it. What's the soil mapping going to be used for?
So it's a layer on Canterbury maps. So it just enables people to know what the soils on their property are. So as far as I understand, it's an updated and more detailed soil mapping of what was previously available.
Kia ora, Gina. Thanks so much for that presentation. And I did just want to acknowledge you as well in terms of your contribution to the Zone Committee and our Biosecurity Advisory Group as well, and your numerous other community involvements. They're very much appreciated, and you contribute a lot in this area. My question was, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot a bit with this, but I wondered if you wanted to just talk a little bit or let the council know about the 2 working groups that are going on with the Zone Committee. It's quite interesting.
Sure. So for the last year, we decided to have shorter meetings and then have working groups afterwards. So the 2 working groups that we decided on was a mahinga kai and biodiversity working group, and also a water quantity working group. So basically just giving us time to look at issues in more depth and come up with an approach going forward to address both of those.
Councillor Peter Scott, did you have the question? I see you indicating.
No, I was just pointing out that Lan had a question. Yeah.
Tēnā koe, Gina, nei te mihi atu ki a koe. My question, you talked about the bank stabilisation work that's going on, in particular in the Wairewa catchment, just with how's the plantings from 2019, are they still going okay, do you know? And I'll carry on from that after that, another question after that.
Yeah, so I think there's been continued work on plantings and stabilisation. There was quite a big planting day last year, I think it was. So that has just been continued.
Following on from that, so does the Zone Committee and that bank stabilisation work, Mahi, do they work closely in with the rating district and the kind of the engineering work for the flooding? And do you know if there's kind of work, do they work closely with one another? They come in behind, so after they've done the flooding work, that they come in behind with that bank stabilisation work? Is that working closely with one another?
I'm not actually sure of the detail, but I would presume so. I assume they would be integrated in doing that bank stabilisation work, reshaping the banks, and then coming in and planting afterwards.
Thank you, Gina. Any other questions? Thank you very much for that very comprehensive report and all the work you do for the community. It's fantastic, and coming along today. We're going to, don't leave, because we're going to invite you to lunch after this. So we'll just move on now. So Kevin, welcome. I acknowledge that you came during that presentation, so thank you for coming. Officially, we're taking you next, if that's all right with you. So you.
Well, thanks very much, Atamaru. 2 things for a start. You've all got copies of the report, so I'll assume you've read that. First of all, the Zone Committee was very sad to see the passing of Evan Smith since the last report to this council. Evan, he often presented to the Christchurch West Melton Zone Committee, and his continuing advocacy for the red zone to be restored as a multi-purpose park that promotes enhanced biodiversity, restoration of mahinga kai, and to create an amenity for both locals and visitors. So he was an ad hoc member of the Zone Committee Recreation Working Group. So we had actually quite a lot to do with him, and it's very sad to see him go. Secondly, the Zone Committee thanks ECAN Council very much for joining with the City Council to write to the ministers in the new government about urban stream contamination. We appreciate that very much. The Zone Committee has a principle to have a fence at the top of the cliff rather than an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and that's been a long standing ideal of the zone committee. We feel it's going to require a national imperative to change the factors that lead to urban stream syndrome. The zone committee was asked to come up with some priority areas in support or in conjunction with the City Council, and we've had a series of 3 workshops to put together the 3 top priority areas for suggested resourcing through the Council's long-term plan, the City Council that is. There was a lot of discussion, as there's many areas that can benefit from more resources, as I'm sure you're aware, but a consistent theme was the quality of the urban streams in Christchurch City and the rivers in Christchurch City, and this was our first priority area. There were some focus areas in there, such as sediment and erosion control, mainly for Opawaho and Heathcote. Sustainable urban drainage system for stormwater, support from the Hingakai projects. Normally, if water is fit from the Hingakai, then it's of good quality. Management of weed pests in urban waterways, management of remaining wetlands, remembering that a large portion of what is now Christchurch City was once wetland. A long-term plan alignment with the Avon River, Green Corridor and other projects. And we also had to sneak in the perennial problem of Christchurch's groundwater, its overuse and conservation for the city that has the highest freshwater use in all of New Zealand. Our second priority was the preservation and improved outcomes for dry land areas and their ecosystems. In the public eye, dry land biodiversity is kind of the poor cousin when compared to wetlands, streams, and so on. However, the Zone Committee has been funding through the Immediate Steps program the preservation of dryland areas, and the hope is to eventually have a dryland park. For instance, on the way to McLean's Island, there are remnant kowhai trees that are greater than 100 years old, and they're in the middle of the grassland pasture there. Since 2015, just under 100,000 has been spent by the Zone Committee on dryland ecosystems in McLean's grasslands, in Intake Road at the very end of our zone out at West Melton. And an initial start has been made on a grassland park with installing rabbit-proof fencing and some supplementary planting. So that was our second priority. Our third priority for resourcing the long-term plan for the City Council was to really support the first 2 by engaging with the public. Suggested focus areas for this could be City Council's ongoing support for the Community Water Partnership, and hopefully ECAM support as well. Has that happened already? There's a question. March. Good. Excellent. Yes, I know March is the signing, but you've indicated you are going to try. Excellent. Good. Good. Oh, sorry, didn't see that.
That's you. And Councillor Marshall's going to sign on our behalf, and I'll be speaking at the opening.
Oh, sorry. Engagement with community groups collecting data, and particularly the sharing of data, particularly water quality data between City Council, between ECAN, perhaps some of the consultants that are doing work, and also some community groups who are out collecting data all of the time. To promote regular education campaigns that lead to behaviour change. A lot of the problems with urban streams will require a large amount of behaviour change, and it needs education and it actually needs a national program as well. The Zone Committee itself tries to do some of this education, but we have 6 community members for a population of 350,000, and those are not good odds. We have a presence at city functions like Meet in the Middle, World Rivers Day, Mother of All Cleanups, but in many instances it feels like we're preaching to the choir. So we'll have to have we will have a stormwater superhero resource soon, thanks very much to ECAN, which will help with the education, but it's the people that we don't reach that we need to talk to. The Christchurch West Melton Zone Committee is kind of different to other zone committees in rural areas. This is very much an urban community. We have a small amount of rural community, but in the rural communities, there's much more of a sense of community than there is in Christchurch City, and also a much lower population that you have to get in touch with. So that was our third priority. Other things, the Zone Committee has a working group for Catchment and the Port Hills. They've been very active during the year and recently presented to this council together with other community groups. And a highlight for the Pawaho has been the recent completion of stage 4 of the Cashmere stream planting. And this has been a long-term project. It was started before I joined 6 years ago, so it has been going for some time, and the changes are really great to see. If you get a chance, go down and have a look. It's really great. The Cashmere Stream and Port Hills Working Group has a focus on erosion and sediment control and has a number of recommendations, and they've spoken to you before, so I'm not going to actually go through most of those. In the last quarter of 2020, the Zone Committee recommended 7 projects for funding from the Immediate Steps program. Some of them were also received funding from ECAN and some received funding also from Council. Finally, just before the end of last year, I attended a community meeting for the Water and Wildlife Habitat Trust, who were looking to develop a collaborative partnership between the landowners and the various agencies to protect the unique biodiversity of the Otukaikinu catchment. Now, this was not an initiative of the Zone Committee, but we went along, and it's, the group has got together with the landowners and tried to come to some agreement about how they should protect the biodiversity in that catchment. So that was really very good. And that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for covering that. Did anybody have any questions? Councillor Lan Farm and Councillor Phil Clearwater.
Thanks for that, Kevin. I'm going to ask a question about the Community Waterways Partnership, but is there any reason why I shouldn't? Because it's not yet launched. I just thought I'd check.
Yeah, go ahead and ask.
It's a general question because I get that the Zone Committee is a key part of developing that, but will the partnership kind of sit with the Zone Committee? Is that where it makes sense for it to sit, or is it more something generally held by the community that the Zone Committee will be part of? Sorry, your button, Kevin.
We've yet to sort that out, I think. It makes sense for it to be sitting with the Zone Committee because we kind of represent the community as a whole. But I gave a presentation to Selwyn and they were worried that it would kind of dilute the, not mana, that's not the right word, dilute the presence of the Zone Committee as being part of a larger organisation. And I think we just have, I think it's, myself personally, I think it's great to get everybody together, and that's part of the sharing of information and sharing of data. And we'll just have to see how it evolves.
Yes, it's very involved over a period of time, so it's really exciting, I think, and we can all work together, and it's a partnership charter, so I think it's fantastic. So good work. Now we've got Councillor, oh wait a minute, Councillor Phil Clearwater first, and then we've got some other people on this side.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for that really good report, and thank you too for your leadership of the Zone Committee, and also to Leslie Ella. It's a long-standing stalwart and leader as well. Thank you. My question is in relation to really the you referred to the deputation the Cashmere Stream Group would have made to us, and you're aware of that. And I think your comment that around the urban stream syndrome, Kevin, is really accurate. And you also referred to how we stopped being the ambulance at the bottom of the boat and we moved to the top. And one of the things that the Cashmere Stream Group raised with us was that with the district plan allowing ongoing housing construction on the Port Hills and particularly in the Lursors around the Craycock area, as long as that building continues to happen, in fact, we'll be at the bottom of the stream. And so it's really just to see if you think the Zone Committee might really support discussions with City Council around some change in the district plan. And we as a council, we've referred to a lot of very constructive work that City Council do with the zone committee and the partnership. Just wondering about your view as chair around, yes, what preventing that development.
We've had a couple of meetings with the city council, and some councillors are very keen on putting more resources into this area, and I think it's happening. Like most things I've found working on the zone committee, if you keep pushing the buttons often enough, then things do eventually happen. It's a slow process, but things do happen. And I think there's a willingness in the council to actually approach this problem with more vigour than they have in the past, probably. That's my impression from the council meetings that I've been to.
Thank you, Councillor Peter Scott.
Thank you very much for coming in, and may I thank you also for acknowledging Evan Smith. I mean, those people that come and put their effort in need to be acknowledged, and so thank you for doing that. You'll be looking for another Evan Smith in your community, and that's my point. My point that I would like to ask you is that you reference the fact that you thought the committee could be bigger to get more people involved. Is that the way you see of maybe getting a more of a urban buy-in, saying that the rural thing is okay, but the urban thing?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this field, but we see that as almost our main priority is getting the message out there, and we do get a lot of help from ECAN with your communications people in doing so. We've got a resource coming up with the superhero trailer and stormwater superhero trailer, and that will help us. We are present at things like Meet in the Middle and all of that stuff. Short of that and taking out, a full page advert in the press, I can't see any other way of getting around it. It is a difficult problem, just talking to these people.
Maybe we should stick it on the back of the bus, some advertising for you on that airport line.
Anything. Yeah, it's really the people that we don't normally come into contact with at these things that we really need to get in touch with. And it's a huge city with lots of different compartments, and maybe the community partnership will be able to spread that word further. And they're already doing a good job, like the Pawaho group, so on. Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. Councillor Craig Pauling.
Got it, Kevin. Yeah, I also want to acknowledge that you've raised about Evan. He's someone close to my heart, had a bit to do with him, so thanks for acknowledging his passing. Yeah, I had a question about the Opawaho stormwater management plan, and really just your reflection, if you've been involved in that, of how it's going, and sort of one positive or key outcome or project you see coming from that, or is it otherwise? Is it frustrating or whatever?
The finger again. The Pawaho one is difficult because you're fighting nature, basically. We've had meetings. We've had separate meetings with Christchurch City Council about their stormwater management plan. They've, as you probably realise, they've just extended the consultation date. They've put it a bit further out because they realise there are a number of problems there. It's extremely difficult. It is a difficult problem, and quite how. Clive Appleton, as you probably know, is having trouble trying to figure out. It's a 30-year plan, and how some of the things he has no control over. For instance, if you're looking at heavy metals in the river, that's got to do with things like zinc runoff from roofs and zinc out of tyres from cars on the roads. The copper problem is another problem with copper brake pads. That's going to require some sort of a national fix to it rather than that. So, but the sediment problem, he's working on it. Yeah. It will happen. It may not happen overnight, as the advert says, but it will happen. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Craig, did you want to?
Some of those events are really good, so I'll just keep encouraging that. You know, definitely what I've noticed is you know, lots of people turn out to do the action stuff, the planting, the stream restoration stuff. So that's where you get the turnout because they feel they can contribute. Whereas in other rounds, it's much harder. But so I just keep encouraging the funding and the support for those events to get people sort of on the ground doing stuff. So
Yeah, no, thanks very much. Yes, we do that. But once again, it's the other people we want to get in touch with to get that behaviour change.
Thank you. Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Thank you. Look, thank you for your report. It's been a very great report. My question sort of follows on from Councillor Scott's comments really about how you engage your constituents, if you like, the people you're trying to change their behaviour. Do you wish that perhaps you had the same raft of regulations supporting action that your rural cousins have? So pretty much every landowner in the rural area has a auditor that knocks on their door and ensures that their daily behaviour is up to scratch to ensure environmental outcomes. Do you think we should impose regulations on every household in Christchurch with the individual auditor visiting to ensure that they are meeting their stormwater and grey and groundwater obligations?
Yeah, we're approaching the rural-urban divide here. Yes, I one of the things I try to educate the people is that Christchurch City is always, it's a lot of the people are taking aim at the rural community and saying they're doing lots of pollution, and I go to great lengths to show them all of the data on urban springs. So I don't really think it's possible to audit every household in Christchurch, but it's a worthy ideal, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. That's the whole reason for the community water partnership, isn't it? To talk to the community, and that's already been done. And we've got a huge indication that there's lots of residents who are very keen to have more information about what they can do. And there are lots of really active water care groups, as Councillor Pauling has noted, in the city. So I think that doing the charter and pushing that forward is just fantastic. It's good your zone committee's done that. So fantastic. Councillor John Sunkle.
Thank you, Nat. And I guess I come back to the community partnership and think about the conversation we had in the Upper Waitaki Zone Committee just 10 days ago, where we have our first catchment group, which is now incorporated society, doing the work. So as the group, we've been the catalyst. We have an issue, that group's incorporated, doing their thing. We don't necessarily have oversight, but we are connected. Now, our next conversation was the group in Tekapo and the community board in Tekapo, and looking to try and bring something into play there. So as a small group with a large geographical area, we can't do the work, but it's that facilitation. So for me, that community group of then going out, having the communication, doing the work in the community, is doing the work of the zone committee in a sense. For me, it's not the zone committee's job to be everywhere doing everything. It's those groups that they can influence, have those dotted line connections with. So I applaud the community group. Don't get hit up if you can't do everything, but the more of those groups you can be associated with and sell the message to, the wider the web of the network. Thanks.
The community partnership is one way of doing that. Yeah.
Moving on, the next person is Councillor Claire Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just before we've even heard Les, I'm going to thank you anyway for all of you for the very good reports, because I know Les will give a good one as well, and I have read what's been produced. But my question's to you, Kevin, and it's around the immediate steps funding, and it's great to see the investment in the Cashmere and the Albert streams. And then you mentioned that you have now you've now looked at another 7 projects. Is there continuing funding going into those initial two, or were they sort of one-offs, or they've come to the end of their support now?
Some are initial funding, some are continuing funding. There's continuing funding for the Drylands Park. That was a multi-year one, but generally the zone committee was they decided it was not best not to have too much of a ongoing commitment, because you're then consigning funds to the future zone committees. The one thing we have done is to make a bit of a focus on one particular watershed within the Christchurch city. And so this current year, a major part of the funding is going to go to the Otokai-Tinu River. So that way you can do kind of more with the amount of money that you've got. Yeah.
Thank you. Next person to speak will be Councillor Vicky Southwood.
Kia ora. Thank you for your presentation. You know that this is something that's very dear to my heart. I'm just interested to know, talking about behaviour change and that getting the message out across all those who are hard to connect to and reach. How important do you think that education of children is in this? I know that's something that the Papawaho Heath Coat River Network think is important. What's the zone committee's view or your view?
Zone committee, yeah, it believes that very, very clearly. Quite often the kids educate parents, and both of my grandkids are doing that. So yeah, it comes up. Yeah, and there's much more environmental awareness with the youth of today, I think.
Very much. The next person to have you got your hand up, Megan? Councillor Ham.
Thanks for your report. And it's really interesting to hear the challenges that your zone committee is facing with engaging with the community and the likes, and the cool projects that you are managing to achieve with immediate steps. As we go into the long-term plan considerations, obviously we're having big conversations about rates rises and about funding availability and the trade-offs that we have to make around, you know, where money goes and what that means for people making decisions about whether or not they can actually spend money on environmental projects. Has the zone committee ever discussed or considered what it could do if it had a specific targeted rate for the Christchurch West Mountain Zone area to do environmental projects?
We've never been so blessed. Yeah, I'm sure. Yes, we could do. I don't know. It's a positive thing, but I don't know about the negative effects that it might give to the zone committee. That suddenly they see zone committee on their rates, and that might be a negative effect, I would think.
Right, thank you very much. The next person to speak would be Councillor Phil Clearwater.
It's really to make a comment in relation to the whole report, if I may, Jenny. Okay, so look, and just arising from the discussion, and probably particularly from my question, which I've asked before, around the partnership with the City Council and the potential or the possibility of the district plan being changed. I just want, I'm not really asking to make an amendment to or a further recommendation. I'm just wondering if we could make a note that we ask Stephanie, say, as our CE, to and I was particularly because Kevin has indicated that so far there's been a positive response from the City Councillors he has talked to. We asked Stephanie if she might talk with the Chief Executive of Christchurch City Council to look at the timetable for their district plan changes and inclusion of consideration for I guess limiting the development in the Cracow part of the Port Hills. And I'm aware, just in saying that, I'm aware that's contentious. There's an ongoing balance between our environment and everybody saying, look, we need more houses. And so it's not going to be an easy conversation, but I think we need to start to have it. So it's really just to ask our CE if we could have those discussions.
All right, I'm sure as a note arising out of this, we can ask the CEO to provide a report back to the council at a later date. Do you want us to respond?
I'm happy to take that up. We have multiple avenues in which we're engaging with this already, but certainly to bring it back to council, yes.
What an act to follow. Comprehensive report. I'm part of the zone committee, so I'm proud about the chair here. But kia ora, Madam Chair, kia ora, Craig, Evie, and Jane, and Tana. For those who don't know me, I'm Lisbon Heller. I'm Tamaki Runanga. I'm from the Salwahara Zone Committee co-chair. Our other co-chair, Fiona, sends apologies. She ain't able to get here because of work commitment. This is the second term of co-chair, and we find that it works quite well. It's unfortunately my first co-chair I had with abandoned us, and now sits at the table. Thank you, Mika. Well, I do like to acknowledge Vicky for the amount of work she puts in at our meeting. Tim Davies quite often comes to our meeting, well, just about every time, and gives us advice. I think without that type of advice, we will be struggling at times. And one other person I'd like to thank is Maria. Our organisers, or whatever you like to call them, I don't think we do thank them enough. She puts a huge amount of work behind the scenes. I know from the amount of emails I receive from them, she's working tremendous amount of hours on these on the zone committee. I presume our annual report or our quarterly report's been tabled, and I'm here to speak on that, and as one of the several opportunities for the year that we will be having. We just had a workshop last month on aspiration and goals and setting priorities for the next 3 years. We haven't finalised that, but we will be in the next before the next meeting. And Vicky certainly put a lot of work into that. We have used over 100,000 of money from the Medi Steps into the biodiversity funding, and there are huge amount of planting going on in the Selwyn district. I personally go out with a lot of the schools and other groups and help them and talk to them about the zone committee and so forth and their planting. Enjoy every minute of it because you get some funny questions asked from children. We also just recently farewelled our 2 long-serving members, and Ron Pello and Alan Lim, which leave me there with being the longest person on the committee. I think there's only one other person's been on there longer than me, was Uncle Watai. I think he has a couple of years more on me, but hopefully to be there and beat him. We also looking forward for the refresh. We are now 3 members, community members down, with Ron and Alan going, and we certainly need a rebuild of new people on the committee. We haven't not at this stage got any farming. We've got one farming consultant. She works on with UK, and not a consultant actually. She works with Simlake Milk Factory as the only person we've got that links into the farming. So we hope to get 2 or 3 more farming or farming industry people on to give it a better balance. Working program for over the next year and thereafter is main one is working on the healthy Waikiri. That's a water river that's quite polluted where there is water running, and we need to work on it. And unless we fix up the rivers like the Waikiri and the Hurricane and all those hard streets and that, we're not going to fix up the Te Waihora. And that's one of our main goals of our zone committee, is to have a healthy Te Waihora. By doing that, we've got to fix up the waters entering it. Without fixing those waters up, we won't ever have a healthy Te Waihora. We're working on the getting testing for nutrient loads of the from the area, keeping working on that, and hopefully get somewhere we can go into on computer and find where the results are. At the moment, I struggle to find the results anywhere because it's spread over so far, so much, and you just can't get to a final goal, what you need to know. And I personally, one of the ones I'm pushing back is to test at the source, find the source from the testing. If you don't find the source and do something about the source, you won't ever have clean water. You go back and educate where the source is. We are quite aware in our district about the drinking water supply. We do know that some of our water, private wells, are contaminated with the nutrient and nitrogen coming through in the atmosphere. Well, it's a hard one to, because we know a lot of the contaminants coming down through the Canterbury Plain. Just take 30 years to get from the top to the bottom. And I think it's going to be 30 years for them. We started doing it now before we stopped that getting into the drinking water, and we certainly don't want to be having children that are really affected by the drinking water. We'd like the ongoing support from the Environment Canterbury, but one part of the Environment Canterbury list of priorities for the zone committees is having 5 Mahinga Kai sites. I personally struggle with that, and I think our zone committee will struggle with that, because I can't see us picking out 5 Mahinga Kai sites. To me, the whole district is a Mahinga Kai site. Every bit of water in it, the Te Waihora, every bit of water runs into Te Waihora. The Canterbury Plains was after all a Mahinga Kai site where our ancestors went there and collected their plants, their honey, and not only for Kai to eat, but for medicine. So I do struggle to say name 5 sites. I struggled with the women's sites last year or the year before. I struggled to say where can I put 5 sites. I'd like to see the Waikiri to hold a lot of it, not just coach forward, and healthy to swim in. But we're going to have to rely on science and scientists to come to being able to find a solution in cleaning up the waterways. And as I said before, unless we get that information from the scientists and get it back to us, we're butting our heads against a brick wall. I think that's about all I think is all I need to say at this stage, and hope there's questions from the written report.
Well, thank you very much, Les. We've heard your call to be able to access the scientific information and find out those. I'm sure we've got the right people in the room listening, so that's that. I acknowledge what you've said there. Councillor Claire Mackay has the first question, then Councillor Peter Scott and Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie, and I'll keep going in a minute.
I've got a question. I'm sorry, I've got a comment and then a question. Two separate ones. Thanks, Liz, for your very passionate report, and I know that the Zone Committee and what's happening in the Silvertiwahula area is really close to your heart, as also here in the Project City. Just with regards to the Mahinga Kai, I think that perhaps if you could turn your, I hear you thinking about the whole area as Mahinga Kai and welcome that. But I think that just think about the terms of reference as being the guidance document. It's just a framework in which to work. It shouldn't be constraining. We don't want it to be constraining in any way. So support you going bigger if you can do that. I think probably just one of the ones, and it's a little bit around the Waikirikiri, which you've talked about quite passionately to here today, is on the document under key achievements, you talked about a community engagement and research being used to develop a new action plan for it's obviously the 3-year one that's in the terms of reference. How much or what significance will the previous work that you've done in developing the zippers and the zipper addendum with the community, how much impact or what significance will they have as a building block in this new action plan that you're talking about? In other words, you're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, are you?
Main thing is we're working with the Southern District Council at the moment. There's wetlands going in down the Waikirikiri, especially around the Salt Spring Snake Creek. I think that's going to be a significant improvement from Coast Forward to the lake. There's also, we have a lot of problems up further up in the White Cliffs area, and that's more with the E. coli more than in that area. It's still got nitrates up there, but it's more the E. coli. And I think with working with the environment, with the Southern District Council on monitoring that is really helping. And even though we do have a lot of E. coli in the Silver Spring area, is a different one. It's mainly bird and animal care like E. coli, where up in the White Cliffs area, it's believed to be a lot of human.
Thank you. The next councillor with a question is Councillor Peter Scott.
Kia ora tātou. It's good to see you here, and it's really good to know that goal of yours of being the longest serving Zone Committee member is top of your mind. It'd be good to see you still around in another 15 years doing this work. And one of the things I guess we do gain from that is the wide experience that you've had over time. Those people that have been there at the foundation time is pretty important to actually bring people on board and educate them. My question though is around the near river recharge. When we opened that, went up there and that was open, it wasn't running. But there was a fantastic presentation there with the schools in terms of the Enviro school work that was being done up there. Have you got any knowledge of how all that's progressing in terms of how that's working and how the school was participating in that?
I work quite a lot with Dr. Brent. Also, I am on the Central Plains Water for South for the Southern District Council. And the reason why we didn't need to open it this year and run the water, because we didn't need to. There's been a significant amount of water this year. It's just phenomenal. Just don't know where it's coming from. It certainly hasn't had the rain, but it's coming up quite high up. And it is there. So we didn't need to open and run it this year, which is a good thing. And for the schools and that, they've put a tremendous amount of work in there, and they've still got another 10 acres or something to plant, because all those trees and next a lot of trees over going to fail within the next year or so.
Thank you very much. The next council speakers are Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie.
Yeah, I've just got a comment and a question. My comment first, I guess, is around the auditing requirements and this unusual situation with Mahingakai. We've got 5 Mahingakai sites, and it sort of sounds a wee bit like it's being tied to our levels of service, which are sort of required by government audit. And perhaps I wonder if this is a reflection of the lack of involvement of tangata whenua in our upper administrative levels. I mean, above ECAN. Yeah, so yeah. But my question is around the data. I'm on the OTOP zone committee, and we have had similar situations where we've either not been given the data or it's been given to us, but it's in a huge report and we have to find it. And I was just wondering if you could give a specific example of where you've not been able to access the information that you required, because I think if we have a specific example, we can pin down better what we need to do as an organisation for our zone committees.
Yeah, I go on computer a lot to find this data, and I got so frustrated, and I ended up contacting Tim Davies personally and saying, "Look, Tim, I can't find this data. Can you direct me or send it me by email?" And it was the same as the Solomon District Council. But without me having to go directly to the organisation, I would never find it. Like you probably would, but I haven't got time to sit on a computer for 12 hours just to find a bit of data whether the white clips are the white carry up the white clips are contaminated. I haven't got that time. So that's why I'm saying if you take the testing done by Southern District Council, ECAN, Christ City Council, universities, anyway, and it's spread everywhere. We had somehow how that could be all collected, and people who need to know or want to know, then just go into a particular site and be more clear. You know, that one that Tim put me on to, just can't remember the name of it. No, it's you're old. So what's the point?
Sounds like a very good, sensible idea. So I hear you, and so do other people. So I think Councillor Grant Edge, you're next.
Thanks, Liz. Just sort of interested in this terms of reference that you've got for the zone committee and this confusion sometimes about 5 Mahingakai sites when we know that we should be looking at the whole of the river. Do you think the national policy statement and its reference to Te Mana o Te Wai, the health of the river, the mana of the river, might actually help in reassessing how your zone committee works in terms of a systems approach rather than site approach?
Yes, they'll help for the why. Won't help for the Canterbury Plains. Not everything that grows in the water or beside the water.
Yes, follow up, Grant.
You raised concern about contamination of private wells. Do you think, does the zone committee think that there's sufficient monitoring taking place of private wells and any action that might be taking place through the district council to assess the problem?
Absolutely not. We have a group out there called Swimmable Selwyn or Kirikiri. They have to get a group their own pockets, get a group together, take all the testing of the water to a hall to have it tested. The council with their council wasn't supported, whether it be ECAN or Southern District Council. So that should not have to happen. There should be both councils should be helping the people to have to have their wells monitored, and for people to say just put a filter in, but some people can't afford a filter. As simple as that, they just can't. And you get, especially in the Selwyn Hut area, there's a lot of retirees out there and a lot of beneficiaries in that out to live out there. They just can't afford to have additional expense to be able to have good cleaning water, drinking water.
Thank you. There's Councillor Ian Kenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Jenny, thank you, Les. And I acknowledge your comments about you can't sort out Te Waihora if you don't sort out all the tributaries and the rivers and streams that flow into the lake. And we've heard at various river rating meetings that they are concerned about the design and the impact of urbanisation, especially into some of the drains and creeks that flow into the bigger rivers. Has the Zone Committee put any thought into the effect that the high rate of urbanisation in your district is likely to have on the water quality in the rivers and streams, and therefore in Te Waihora itself?
Yes, I think a couple of years ago when we Selwyn District Council to do the heavy metal testing, and I didn't know what I was talking about. I thought I was talking about a industrial yard where they had metal work. So I had to explain to them what I meant by doing the testing of heavy metals into the waterways. And I think also there is a problem of culverting large areas through these urban areas, and I personally think it's blocking the highway for the long canal to go up to their natural habitat. And I'm pretty positive they won't travel through a culvert that's anything longer than 50, maybe 100 metres. You get some of them are 3 or 4 kilometres long. So that is a major problem in the urban areas.
Just a brief follow-up. It would seem to me that this council may well appreciate some advice on where we're getting that planning wrong. In terms of the urbanisation and the design on the effect on some of those tributaries, perhaps the Zone Committee, if they have advice to pass on to the Regional Council, that might be appreciated.
We get this problem of the nitrates leaching into the waterways. To understand that and understand how we can fix that problem, if there is a fixable problem, it's nothing that can be passed on between to the problem sorted out. I think does that make sense?
Thank you. That's good. Ian, thank you, Ian. I'd like to invite Jan to ask a question or make a comment. Thank you, Jan.
Tēnā koe, Les. It's good to see you surviving with our councillor hands by your side. I wasn't going to say that. Les, I see in your report you've got a picture of the Ahuriri Lagoon. Just a brief comment from yourself. How do you think it's going, and have you, and the work that's gone out there?
I think that's one of the major projects we've have done in the Canterbury area to help to clean up the waterways entering Te Waihora. I think, unfortunately, we've had a low water flow this year through the Hiratini, but I think it's going to help and slow down the nitrates. It's pity we couldn't take a lot more water out of Hiratini, but we only can do what we can afford, and I think it is a hell of an improvement on it. The water going out. I see just coming up very shortly. There's a meeting to hopefully to have all the billboards put up out there, 5 billboards out there, and I'm sure that the council would get out some stage to look at it when it's completed and all the waterway and the tributary that feeds it now has just been cleaned out recently too, so a lot of that pitchy grass is gone as well, so we get a better flow, better fish passage going into the we did the monitoring out there recently and very encouraging of the number of Mangakai species that are in there.
Talking about the flow, do you think that that the water, the Huratini, well, it's called Huratini because there's many turns, that the flow should follow the traditional riverbed? So where that cut is. So would you envisage that if you actually diverted all the water off that straight cut and diverted it traditionally back into its traditional flow, and that went through the wetland, that it would help the wetland?
Larger wetlands, Jan. I cursed the day my grandfather was there digging that cut. He was one of the ones that's worked on cutting that out. And I think that's the only way to really clean up the water of the hurricane is to take it through a settling pond or settling wetlands, and certainly needs to be bigger than what it is now. And that's why we hope to do the same thing at Snakes Creek stream, McGrath stream. We hope to take 90% of the water through it, not just 10% like we have out here.
The proposal will be extending more extensive wetlands in that area.
We're actually working on it at the moment, and we're looking at that next paddock over, not so much for the as a wetlands, but able for the water to flood into there and flood back through the other way.
Thank you very much, Lee. That was extremely interesting, and thank you for having all the questions and comments and responding. So that we really appreciate that. So thank you very much to the three of you for presenting your reports. We've just got to move the resolutions now. So we've got three resolutions, and they're all receiving the reports from each of your zone committees. So I'm just going to move them as a block. So I'll move them from the chair. I'm looking for a seconder, and I think it's seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Obviously there's not, so we declare that carried. So thank you very much for those very interesting reports and providing us with more detail. We'd like to invite you to join us for lunch now, and we're just going to go in the back room and have lunch. So you're most welcome to join us. So thank you very much, and we'll adjourn the meeting now for lunch. Thanks.
Just say
we'll be back at 1:15. Yeah, for people listening.